Hello, everyone. Have you ever found yourself understanding English perfectly when listening or reading, but the moment you try to speak, the words just won't come out? You're not alone. This is something a lot of learners struggle with, and today, we're going to break down why this happens and what you can do about it.
Exactly. It's actually very common. You watch English films, you listen to podcasts, and maybe you even read English books. You understand everything just fine. But when it comes to speaking, your mind freezes, and you either struggle to find words or feel too nervous to even try.
So, why does this happen? One big reason is that listening and reading are passive skills, while speaking is an active skill. When you listen or read, you're absorbing information, but you're not required to create sentences on the spot. Speaking, on the other hand, forces you to form thoughts quickly and express them in real time.
And let's be honest, speaking also comes with pressure. Unlike reading or writing, where you have time to process things, speaking requires an immediate response. That pressure can make you hesitate, second-guess yourself, or even avoid speaking altogether.
Another reason could be a lack of speaking practice. If you don't actively train your brain to produce English in conversation, it's no surprise that you struggle when you actually need to speak. Think of it like this: if you only ever watch people play the piano but never practiced yourself, would you expect to sit down and play beautifully? Probably not. The same applies to speaking English.
That's a great analogy. And then there's the fear of making mistakes. Many learners worry too much about grammar, pronunciation, or sounding perfect. This fear makes them hesitant to speak, which actually slows down their progress.
Yes, the truth is, the more you hesitate, the harder it gets. But if you push yourself to speak, even if it's not perfect, your confidence will grow. That's why immersion is so important, surrounding yourself with opportunities to speak and making English a natural part of your daily life.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be difficult. You can start by speaking to yourself in English, thinking in English, or even practicing with a language partner. The key is to start small and build from there.
Another important factor is vocabulary. Even though you understand a lot of words, you might not always be able to recall them quickly when you need them in conversation. This is completely normal, and it's something that improves with practice. The more you expose yourself to new words and phrases, the easier it will be to pull them out in the right moments.
Absolutely. Also, it's helpful to focus on phrases or chunks of language rather than individual words. This way, when you're speaking, you don't have to think of each word separately. Instead, you'll be able to speak in natural, fluent sentences that flow better.
That's a great point. For example, instead of memorizing single words like happy, excited, or surprised, try learning phrases like I'm really excited about, or it makes me feel happy when. These structures make it easier to start a sentence and get your message across without stopping to think about each individual word.
And remember, learning to speak English is a gradual process. No one becomes fluent overnight. But with consistency, dedication, and a willingness to make mistakes, you'll see progress. Don't let fear of mistakes hold you back. Mistakes are part of the learning journey.
Yes, and finally, let's talk about the role of listening. You might think that just because you understand English when you hear it, you're ready to speak it. But it's important to note that listening actively is just as important as speaking practice.
Right. When you listen to English, focus on how sentences are structured, how native speakers use their voices, and the rhythm of the language. This helps you understand how to sound more natural when you speak. It's all about familiarizing your brain with how the language works.
And try to repeat what you hear. Mimicking the natural flow of conversation will help you build fluency. Whether it's repeating phrases from movies, songs, or podcasts, repetition is key to becoming more confident and improving your speaking skills.
So, remember, understanding English is an amazing first step, but you need to practice speaking regularly if you want to become fluent. The more you practice, the more comfortable and confident you'll feel. It's all about building up your speaking muscles.
We hope this helps you understand why it can be tricky to speak even though you understand English well. And we're sure that with a bit more practice and confidence, you'll be speaking like a pro in no time. Another crucial point is getting comfortable with the act of speaking itself. Even when you understand English well, it can feel intimidating to speak because it's so easy to get caught up in your thoughts, worrying about making mistakes. But the truth is, you're not alone in this. Many learners feel the same way. The key is to push through those moments of doubt and start practicing speaking anyway.
Exactly. It's normal to feel like you're stumbling at first, but the more you engage in conversation, the less you will focus on the mistakes. You'll start paying attention more to the flow of the conversation, and that's when you will start improving.
It's also important to recognize that speaking is a skill that takes time to develop. It's not about perfection, it's about communication. If you're getting your message across, even with a few errors, you're already succeeding.
Absolutely. One thing that's helped many learners is practicing with language partners or tutors. Having regular conversations with someone who can guide you through mistakes and help you grow is incredibly useful. Don't be afraid to ask them to correct you or give you feedback.
And don't feel discouraged if at times you find yourself struggling to express something. It happens to everyone. The more you expose yourself to English in different forms, the more words and expressions you'll pick up.
That's why watching English films or reading aloud is so beneficial. It helps reinforce what you know and gives you a chance to practice pronunciation and intonation. Even if you're speaking to yourself, it's still valuable practice.
And speaking of pronunciation, it's important to remind yourself that you don't have to sound like a native speaker to be understood. A clear and confident way of speaking, even with a bit of an accent, is perfectly fine. The goal is communication, not imitation.
That's a good point. Embrace your accent and the unique way you speak. It's part of what makes you, you. The more authentic you are, the more comfortable you'll feel while speaking.
Another great way to practice speaking is to set small, manageable goals. For instance, decide to have a conversation in English for 5 minutes every day. Then increase the time gradually as you become more comfortable. These small steps help you build your speaking confidence.
And don't be afraid of silence in conversations. It's totally normal to take a moment to think, especially when you're forming sentences in a new language. No one is rushing you, and it's okay to pause and gather your thoughts.
Yes, silence is part of the process. You can't always be speaking non-stop, and taking those pauses will help you think more clearly and organize your ideas before speaking.
Another thing to keep in mind is the importance of listening. Often, we focus so much on speaking that we forget how essential listening is in building our speaking skills. When you actively listen to how native speakers construct sentences, use expressions, and tone their voice, it directly impacts how you speak as well.
That's right. Listening isn't just about understanding what's being said. It's about learning how to respond, picking up natural phrases, and mimicking the rhythm and structure of sentences. For example, you'll notice that in natural conversations, people often shorten words or sentences, like gonna instead of going to, or wanna instead of want to. These are things you'll start recognizing when you listen actively.
Exactly, Emma. And speaking of listening, don't be afraid to watch content in English that's a bit above your current level. You might not understand everything, but over time, you'll catch more words and phrases. Plus, it gives you exposure to different accents and ways of speaking.
Right, and that variety helps you become more adaptable. English is spoken by people all over the world, so getting used to hearing different accents and slang is important. It helps you not only understand the language better, but also feel more confident in your ability to communicate, no matter who you're speaking to.
Another tip is to find ways to connect with your English-speaking environment. For instance, join online communities or social media groups where people are chatting in English about topics you enjoy. When you're immersed in topics that interest you, it becomes easier to keep the conversation going.
Yes, connecting with others online is a great way to practice. You don't need to have face-to-face conversations to improve your speaking skills. Messaging, commenting, or even recording voice notes can make a big difference. The more you use English in real-life situations, the more confident you'll become.
And remember, it's not just about speaking perfectly. English, like any language, is about making connections with others. The goal isn't flawless grammar, it's expressing yourself in a way that makes sense and feels comfortable for you. And when you focus on the message, the mistakes won't seem so big.
True. Also, remember that language is always evolving. Just because something is grammatically correct doesn't mean it's the most natural way to speak. So, it's okay to experiment with new ways of expressing yourself. Mistakes are just a part of the learning process.
Absolutely. So, give yourself the grace to make mistakes. The more you practice, the more your confidence will grow, and the better you'll get. It's a journey, not a race, so take your time and enjoy the process.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Jake, confidence, practice, and patience are the keys to mastering speaking, even if you already understand English.
Another important factor is finding a study routine that works for you. It's not about cramming all at once, but about making small, consistent efforts. You can dedicate just 10–15 minutes a day to speak, and that consistent practice will help you build confidence over time. You don't need long hours, just a regular commitment.
And you can incorporate speaking into your everyday activities, too. For instance, if you're cooking or cleaning, try describing what you're doing out loud in English. It's a great way to build fluency without the pressure of having a formal conversation.
Absolutely. Even talking to yourself can help. For example, you can rehearse what you would say in a given situation, like ordering food at a restaurant or asking for directions. You'd be surprised how much this helps when you actually find yourself in those situations.
And don't forget about mimicking. A lot of learners find it helpful to imitate what they hear in English, whether it's from movies, podcasts, or YouTube videos. You could repeat phrases exactly how the speaker says them, focusing on tone and pronunciation. It might feel a little awkward at first, but it's a fantastic way to improve.
Yes, mimicking is really useful. You're training your brain to adopt the rhythm of the language, and your speaking will sound much more natural as a result. Plus, by listening closely, you can pick up useful phrases or expressions that native speakers use in everyday conversations.
And don't be afraid of speaking slowly. Many learners think they need to speak fast to sound fluent, but that's not true at all. Speaking slowly allows you to pronounce words more clearly, and it gives you time to think. Fluent speakers often speak at a comfortable pace, and that's something to remember.
That's a great point, Emma. It's about clarity over speed. And sometimes, slowing down also gives you time to find the right words. You don't always need to rush to fill every silence. In fact, pauses can be really powerful, as they allow you to gather your thoughts before responding.
Exactly, and don't stress about perfect pronunciation. What's more important is getting your message across. Native speakers often make pronunciation mistakes too, but they're still understood. So focus on communicating your ideas, rather than stressing about every sound.
Another thing is to take advantage of technology. You can use language apps or online platforms to practice speaking, even with strangers. Some apps connect you with native speakers for short conversations, which is a great way to practice real-world English in a relaxed setting.
Yes, those apps can really help you break the ice. You're speaking with people who understand that you're learning, and they're there to help, not judge. It's the ideal environment for making mistakes and learning from them.
And lastly, keep the bigger picture in mind. Don't get discouraged by setbacks. Learning a language is a long-term process, and speaking fluently doesn't happen overnight. Celebrate your small victories and be kind to yourself along the way.
Couldn't agree more, Jake. Each step you take, even if it's small, is progress. So if you can say a sentence you couldn't before, or understand a phrase you didn't get last month, that's something to be proud of. Progress is what matters.
Exactly. So keep practicing, enjoy the journey, and don't let fear stop you from speaking. The more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get. And before you know it, speaking English will feel just as natural as understanding it. Another key tip is finding conversation partners. Having someone to practice with makes a huge difference. It doesn't have to be a formal tutor. It can be a friend, a family member, or even someone you meet online. The more you practice speaking with others, the easier it becomes.
And the great thing is that you don't always have to have a deep or complicated conversation. Even casual chat about your day, hobbies, or interests will help you get used to speaking in English. Sometimes, the simplest conversations are the most valuable for building fluency.
Absolutely. It's those everyday conversations that allow you to get comfortable with common phrases and idioms. When you start recognizing patterns in conversations, it gets easier to predict what people might say next, which helps you think faster in English.
Another approach that works really well is language exchange. You can find someone who speaks English and wants to learn your language, and then you can exchange practice time. For example, you can talk for 30 minutes in English and then switch to your native language for the next 30 minutes. It's a win-win for both parties.
That's a great way to make learning feel more balanced and mutual. You are not only getting help with your speaking skills, but you're also contributing to someone else's learning journey. It's an exchange of knowledge, and both people benefit.
And don't be afraid to get creative with your learning process. If you're not in a situation where you can have face-to-face conversations, you can record yourself speaking. Listen back to your recordings and identify areas you want to improve. It's a fantastic way to track your progress and build confidence.
That's such a good idea, Emma. It can feel a bit awkward at first, but it really helps to hear how you sound. Plus, it's easier to catch any mistakes or areas where you might need to work on pronunciation or grammar.
Exactly. And if you make mistakes, that's okay. It's part of the learning process. The key is to keep moving forward and not let fear of mistakes stop you. After all, mistakes are opportunities to improve.
Yes, and remember that even native speakers make mistakes sometimes. English isn't perfect, and neither are you. As long as you're communicating, that's what matters most.
One thing I like to do is set little goals for myself. For example, I'll decide to learn a certain number of new words each week or try to speak for 10 minutes in English every day. These little goals keep me motivated and give me something to work towards.
That's a great tip. Setting small, achievable goals makes the whole process feel more manageable. And when you accomplish them, it gives you that sense of achievement that keeps you going.
And don't forget about the power of repetition. Repeating phrases, sentences, or even short conversations can make them stick in your memory. It helps you get more comfortable with the language and builds fluency naturally over time.
Yes, repetition is a powerful tool. It's how we learn everything, really. And the more you repeat, the less you have to think about what you're saying, because it becomes second nature.
Another tip is to expose yourself to as much English as possible. The more you hear and see the language, the more you'll get used to how it sounds and how it's used. Watch movies, listen to podcasts, read books, whatever you can do to immerse yourself in the language.
Immersion is key. The more you're exposed to English in different contexts, the more you begin to understand the culture behind it as well. You'll start to notice expressions, slang, and ways of speaking that are commonly used in different situations.
Absolutely. It's like training your brain to think in English, and that's when everything starts to feel more natural. The more you hear it, the easier it becomes to think in English without having to translate from your native language.
One final thought: be patient with yourself. Learning a language is a journey that takes time. Don't rush it, and don't expect instant results. Consistency and perseverance are key. Even if you don't see immediate progress, every day you practice, you're moving forward.
Exactly. Enjoy the journey, celebrate the small victories, and trust that all your hard work will pay off. Before you know it, you'll be speaking with confidence and understanding English like a pro.
So, take it step by step, stay motivated, and remember every bit of practice brings you closer to your goal. Keep at it. Another great way to improve is by shadowing. Shadowing is when you listen to an audio or video in English and try to repeat what's being said immediately after hearing it. This method helps with pronunciation, rhythm, and understanding how native speakers sound when they speak.
Oh yes, shadowing is so effective. It not only improves your speaking skills, but also trains your listening. You get used to the natural flow of conversation, the pauses, and the intonation patterns that make English sound more natural.
Absolutely. And when you shadow, try to mimic the speaker's voice, pace, and tone. It's like learning to sing along to a song, but with spoken words. You start to feel more comfortable with the language, almost as if it's your own.
Right, and once you feel comfortable with shadowing, you can start creating your own sentences. You can even record yourself and compare it to the original speaker to see how close you are. It's really rewarding.
Another important point is reading out loud. Many people focus on silent reading, but speaking the words as you read them aloud improves both your reading skills and speaking fluency. It's also a great way to practice pronunciation and build confidence.
Reading out loud can help you get more familiar with sentence structures, grammar, and vocabulary. Plus, it's a great way to reinforce what you've learned. And you don't have to do it for long periods. Just 5 or 10 minutes a day makes a big difference.
It's also a good idea to engage with content that interests you. If you're a fan of sports, find articles or podcasts related to that. If you enjoy music, try learning the lyrics to your favorite songs in English. When you're engaged with the content, it makes learning feel more natural and fun.
Exactly. When the content excites you, it doesn't feel like studying, it feels like you're just enjoying something you love while learning. The best part is that the language you learn this way sticks with you longer.
And if you enjoy video games or apps, many of them also have language settings. Switching your apps to English is another way to immerse yourself in the language without even thinking about it.
Great point. And if you're into social media, try following English-speaking influencers or creators. It's an easy way to expose yourself to current language trends, slang, and conversational English. Plus, it can be really fun to see how people communicate casually online.
Yes, and if you ever find yourself stuck with a word or phrase, don't hesitate to look it up. There are tons of online tools and resources like dictionaries, translation apps, or even language forums where you can ask questions and get quick answers.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes when speaking or writing. Mistakes are a sign of progress. They show that you're trying, learning, and growing. The more mistakes you make, the closer you get to mastering the language.
Exactly. Everyone makes mistakes, even native speakers. It's part of the learning process. So, don't worry about being perfect. Focus on improving little by little.
Another tip is to learn phrasal verbs. They're used so often in casual conversations and can really make your English sound more natural. Instead of using simple verbs, learn the multi-word expressions like give up or look after. These will help you sound more fluent.
Phrasal verbs can be tricky at first, but once you understand them, they really make your conversations more authentic. They help you connect better with native speakers because they're part of everyday speech.
And don't forget about practicing with a variety of accents. English is spoken differently in different parts of the world, so it's helpful to expose yourself to various accents, whether it's British, American, Australian, or any other regional accent. This will make you more adaptable when listening and speaking in different contexts.
That's a great point. Being able to understand different accents will make you a better listener overall. You will also feel more comfortable when you encounter a speaker with a different accent in real life.
And remember, even if you don't understand everything the first time, that's okay. Listening practice takes time, and the more you listen, the better you'll get. Don't be discouraged by small setbacks.
Yes, exactly. The key is persistence. Even if you don't understand everything right away, keep listening and practicing. Your brain will start picking up on patterns, and over time, things will click into place.
That's the beauty of learning a language. It's a gradual process. Celebrate the small wins, whether it's understanding a new phrase, speaking more fluently, or just feeling more confident with each conversation.
Absolutely. Every step forward, no matter how small, brings you closer to your goal. The journey may take time, but with dedication and the right strategies, you'll get there.
Keep going, keep practicing, and enjoy the process. The more you immerse yourself in English, the more fluent and confident you'll become. The sky's the limit.
And one more thing that's often overlooked: speaking practice with others. Find language exchange partners or tutors who are willing to practice with you. It's great to converse with someone who can provide immediate feedback, correcting any mistakes while giving you a chance to improve in real time.
That's a fantastic idea. Speaking with others allows you to practice what you've learned in a practical setting. Plus, it boosts your confidence when you realize that you're able to have a conversation in English, even if it's just about small daily topics.
Absolutely. And remember that language exchange doesn't have to be formal. It could be casual, like chatting with a friend who speaks English, or even online conversations with people from around the world. The goal is just to keep practicing in real-world situations.
Right, and when you're speaking, try not to focus too much on grammar. It's natural to make mistakes, and trying too hard to be grammatically perfect can slow down the flow of conversation. Instead, focus on getting your message across clearly.
Exactly. Fluency is about communication, not perfection. Grammar can always be refined later, but being able to express your ideas in English is what matters most in conversations.
And that brings us to another great point: consistency. Set aside a bit of time every day to practice English, whether it's speaking, listening, or reading. Small, consistent efforts will always be more effective than long, irregular sessions.
Yes, it's all about creating a habit. The more you make it a part of your daily routine, the more natural and effortless it becomes. You won't have to think about it as much, and before you know it, you'll be speaking English more confidently.
That's true. And while we're on the subject of practice, don't forget about the power of visual learning. Watch English TV shows, movies, or YouTube videos with subtitles. This can be an excellent way to expose yourself to natural speech patterns, new vocabulary, and common idioms.
Watching shows or films can also be a fun way to learn. You can pick up on how words are pronounced, hear different accents, and even learn some informal language that might not be in textbooks. Plus, it's a great way to keep the learning process enjoyable.
And if you're watching content that interests you, like a favorite TV series, you'll feel motivated to continue. It becomes less about studying and more about enjoying the experience while still learning at the same time.
Definitely, when you're enjoying the content, you're far more likely to stick with it and really pay attention to the language being used. That's what makes language learning feel less like a chore.
It's also helpful to set realistic goals for yourself. Don't aim for fluency overnight. Set small milestones like being able to have a 5-minute conversation in English or learning 10 new words a week. These smaller goals will keep you motivated.
And those small achievements add up over time. You'll look back after a few months and realize how much progress you've made. It's the little steps that led to big changes in the end.
Absolutely. The key is to enjoy the journey and stay committed. Learning English might feel challenging at times, but with patience and persistence, it'll become second nature.
Exactly. So, to wrap things up, remember that the more you practice, the more confident you'll become. Whether it's listening, speaking, reading, or writing, every little bit helps. Keep going and enjoy the process of learning. You've got this.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes along the way. Mistakes are just another part of the learning process. Keep pushing forward, and soon enough, you'll be speaking English with ease. Good luck, and keep practicing.
We hope you found these tips helpful. Keep at it, and remember, language learning is a journey, not a destination. Take it one step at a time, and soon, speaking English will feel as natural as breathing.
Thanks for joining us today, and keep improving.
Bye.
Bye.